And I have a question for James. What do you see as the goal of the Libertarian Party of Oklahoma for the next 4 years, and how will opening or closing the primaries help facilitate that goal?
Well, it would be presumptuous of me to say, here's what the goal for the Libertarian Party should be. If you're asking me within the context of a political party, what do I think that would be? I would say the goal of the Libertarian Party ought to be over the next 4 years to establish itself as a viable alternative to the two major parties. That should be its goal. How does it accomplish that? I think number one, running quality candidates for office is a good start, and finding ways to fund those candidates. Number two, I think maintaining the open primary for independents would also be a part of that. The fact is that the Libertarian Party isn't, if it's going to be a bona fide political party, is not and cannot be something completely different than the other two parties. There are just ways you do things, right? And it's like building a car or building a train or a building. There are just ways you do it that are the correct ways of doing it if you're going to build an actual party. Now, if you're not interested in having a party, if you're interested in maintaining some sort of ideological purity within the party, remain a movement that moves back and forth between the two major parties. Otherwise, you're going to have to accept the fact that no, Republicans aren't all the same. You have the Bush faction, you have the Trump faction, you have the Cruz faction, you have the Rand Paul faction. They don't all believe that Republicans, what it means to be a Republican. They don't all agree with that. Same thing with Democrats. You have the Clinton faction, the Sanders faction. You have even, although it has dwindled, you still have a tiny Warren-type faction within the Democrat Party. And they don't all agree on what it means to be Democrats. And certainly not all libertarians agree either about what libertarianism means. The non-aggression principle is a great general principle, but the is when you start getting into details, there is a lot of disagreement over what constitutes aggression. And that is a huge dividing line amongst a variety of libertarians. So they're going to have to function. Either you're a political party or not. And if you're going to be a political party, you do the things that it takes to be a successful party. And I think at this point in time, because the Libertarian Party, as I said, is not well recognized by voters, has not been exposed to voters, if they want voters to vote for them, they need to expose themselves to them. An open primary facilitates that.
For students in the audience, please remember to sign up on the sign-up sheet for your extra credit. Okay, Chad Alexander. Why would you let anybody that wouldn't commit to your party, the Libertarian Party, decide who represents the Libertarian Party?
That's a good question, and that's a question for the Libertarian Party to answer, and I think that's why you guys are having this conversation. If you look at the presidential election, where there was an open primary, I don't believe Ted Cruz won a state. I think Donald Trump won every state that had an open primary. Now, Cruz didn't win all the closed primary states. Trump won a lot of closed primary states as well. But when it came to open primaries, you saw Trump win all of them. He ran the board. Because he motivated a lot of people that hadn't been motivated before to get involved. And it was the biggest upset in presidential history. I mean, literally, none of the experts thought he had a chance on election night. And I would say it's the biggest upset I've ever seen, and probably will see in my lifetime in presidential politics. Someone who's never held public office before or served in the military came out, beat 16 other Republicans, and became Republican nominee for President of the United States. He won every open primary, and he won a lot of the closed primaries, but only did Cruz win in closed primary states. And I would say that if you look at the Democrats, this is the divide I was talking about earlier, and I think James hit on this right. Not everybody is the same way. Rural Democrats and urban Democrats in Oklahoma are very different. Rural Republicans in Oklahoma and Metro Republicans in Oklahoma have a lot of differences, so they don't believe the same thing. So Oklahoma is a closed primary state. Republicans have a lot of states that are open primaries and do things differently. And so, I mean, it's really a question for you. I mean, there is a lot of independents that come in. You know, you could have more independents vote than you have registered libertarians making their choice. But I will say, politics is a game about numbers, and we talk about big tents, and we've seen some polarization in the Republican Party, and we're seeing some polarization in the Democrat Party. I mean, I remind people, Bernie Sanders wasn't even a registered Democrat who became the Democrat nominee for president. He's an independent, and almost became the presidential nominee. And so, I mean, I can't answer for libertarians of Oklahoma being Republican why they should or shouldn't open their primaries, but I would agree with James. You know, it's about numbers. If you're going to try to attract people to your party, and even though libertarianism isn't in its infancy as an ideal, as a party in Oklahoma building, it is. And so it's up to them to decide how they want to build a party, but you can't win without numbers.
Traci Baker, how do you think the question of open or closed primaries will affect candidates in their ability to gain the support of volunteers and gain money from volunteers in the elections to come?
Thank you, Gene. When it comes to libertarian candidates running campaigns and being able to solicit volunteers and donations, volunteers and donations aren't really affected too much directly by the primary status. When I ran for office, I had a lot of Republicans and Democrats as volunteers. My biggest donor that I got was a Democrat. You don't have to restrict yourself to just libertarian operates in your campaign, and closing off the independent vote in a primary race isn't going to change that. What closing off the independent race and independent vote in a primary race does is you and your libertarian opponents in a libertarian primary are competing for a smaller swath of voters. In fact, this makes your campaign a little bit more easy to navigate. It makes it easier for you to interact with a smaller swath of voters in order to receive that nomination, to be on that general election ballot. It means you have to do a little bit more independent outreach in the general election rather than the primary election, but you certainly don't have to. You can do the exact same campaigning strategies as you would in an open primary. It's all up to the libertarian votes in the end, though. It doesn't change the fact that if independents vote, it doesn't change the fact that libertarians are going to be the one person who decides this in a closed system. I think that a closed system empowers libertarian candidates to craft a better message, to focus on their primary race in a libertarian sense rather than in a grandstanding sense or in a populist sense. Mr. Alexander, he brought up the fact that Donald Trump won open primaries and Bernie Sanders won open primaries. Well, traditional party members of these two parties did not want these two candidates at all. Trump was very much disliked by the Republican establishment. Sanders wasn't even really a Democrat. And these two individuals took over open primaries and had a great deal of success with them. And when we're such a small party with just about 4,000 members, and 4,000 dedicated members who are more principled and more establishment type within our own party, having a populist type candidate take over would be very detrimental to our message. And I think that would damage our candidates' abilities to run successful elections in the future.
Okay, here in Oklahoma, since we've got ballot access, it's now possible to register as a libertarian. A lot of people have gone out and become libertarians. So Joe, why wouldn't a closed primary disenfranchise all of those people that have recently registered as libertarian?
Like, when,
Well, would it or wouldn't?
again, I have to agree with the right side of the table. Numbers is politics. Numbers is financial strength. You can't run a campaign on a tiny little budget because you have a tiny little group. And you can't get supporters to support your campaign if they think they're gonna waste your money. Huh? You did what? Well, yeah, but I'm talking about to run against $3 million budgets. But he didn't win either. He did a good job, okay? But rephrase your question again. I think we got off base on that one.
Oh, that's okay. You go ahead.
Okay?
Go anywhere you want.
I just feel that staying with the ethics of the libertarians is fine, okay? We want to do that, okay? And we want to fight for the rights of liberty and the right to own private property. I'm one of the biggest people in the country fighting for private property. But I also am going to be one of the biggest bulldogs in this race because I have the biggest following. And if we're going to shut the doors on the numbers that we need to fight for the liberty of all people in the state of Oklahoma, it just doesn't seem fair. We can take 316,000 libertarians and welcome them in, or independents, and welcome them into the voting system of the Libertarian Party, and hope that 200,000 of them change their political party because they finally believe in the Libertarian Party. I did. I ran as an independent as president in one of the biggest damn races you ever seen. And amongst my town hall meetings in Texas and Louisiana and Arkansas, I met other candidates that are running for state offices that were libertarians. And they're the ones who got me to change my party to libertarian. Because even though I was an independent, I still believed that I had the rights to my life, my liberty, and my personal property. And I think there's a whole lot of independents out there that are confused about that. And I think you're doing a detrimental thing to the Libertarian Party by shutting the door on 316,000 people in the state of Oklahoma. And if I was a voter in the state of Oklahoma on the outside of this process, and I saw, we're just gonna stick to our 3,600 or 3,900 people, and to hell with the rest of you, why would I vote you to be my governor? Because you're not gonna vote for this guy over here, or you're not going to support him, or you're not going to support her, or you're not going to support Traci. You know, this is about people, and this is about our rights as Oklahoma citizens. And I think it would be detrimental to close the doors.
Okay, Rex, how will the Libertarian Party grow its numbers of registered Libertarian voters, even if we have a closed primary?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Gene, because it's kind of been the theme of this discussion at this point. It's like it requires numbers to win elections. The question is, at what cost? How much are you willing to compromise your message and your core principles in order to get elected? That is not something that a libertarian should even be considering. That is not something that's even in our platform. That's not something that's in our principles. That's not something that's anywhere in our ideals. We do not compromise on our principles. We do the right thing. We value the rights of all people all the time. The idea that we are eliminating 316,000 people, or that we are in some manner excluding these guys and, you know, not being opening and welcoming, is not entirely accurate, because what we are asking them to do is come register as libertarian. Why are you going to register to be a libertarian if you get to vote in their elections regardless? There's no point. People change parties for specific psychological reasons. They do it out of anger or they do it out of passion. They very rarely do it on a candidate basis. They very rarely do it on a position basis. The people that will leave the independent status have either left one of the two old parties because they became angry with them, or they never joined with them because there was no passion for them to join those two parties. If we are going to have people join our party, it should be because they are joining it because of the message, because of the principle, because they found a passion and not out of anger against the other two parties, and not out of disinterest for being an independent. They are not a monolithic source, just like none of the other parties are. They are a group of people that have a wide diversity of thoughts on policy positions, but they have not found their passion. We are giving them the opportunity to exercise their lack of passion for our message by not committing to our party and choosing our message bearer. It's a doubly negative experience because we don't get the credibility of their numbers, no matter how many of them vote for us. Even if all 316,000 independents made the decision to jump out and vote in the primary, and they, 30% vote for Joe, 30% vote for me, and 30% vote for Chris, and we wind up having a runoff election, and all 316,000 people decide to come out and vote in the runoff election, and 51% vote for one and 49% vote for the other. There is still zero commitment on their part. There is still zero understanding of the core libertarian principles. And we have just allowed an uneducated populace to determine the libertarian message in our infancy. They're talking about how young we are as a party and how we don't have the exposure. They're absolutely right. The answer to this question is going to come down to the fact is how much of our message are we willing to compromise in order to grow our numbers? My argument is that we should not be willing to compromise any more than 5 to 7% of our message. The argument to the converse is we should be willing to compromise any amount in order to gain the numbers, and that's not the case. The Libertarian Party does not operate under the same principles and auspices of the old parties. We operate on message and message alone. It's not about a candidate, it's not about the party, it is about the message. And if you can't get people to buy into the message by making a simple commitment of showing their passion for the message by re-registering as a Libertarian in order to choose who delivers that message, then we might as well not even be a party because we have completely defeated our own purpose.
James, is it possible for a group of non-libertarian to register as independents and then somehow sway the libertarian election to a poorer candidate so that their candidate has a better advantage during the election?
We hear about this all the time. I've heard Republicans complain about this. I'm sure Chad has as well. I hear Democrats complain about it. Again, just from an objective, not having a concern about what the candidates are saying, just taking this from an objective measure, I think you have to define what you mean by a better candidate, right? Is better the sense that, well, I'm articulating this sense of pure libertarianism, or is better this candidate knows how to reach voters in elections? Those are two different things. And so the Libertarian Party is going to, again, I'm going to come back to, if the Libertarian Party wants to be a real political party, they're going to have to accept that there are differing factions and that the party does not, no party controls message. Let's get this fact. In modern elections, parties don't control messages, candidates do. And if libertarians are concerned that independents are going to take over their primaries and recruit and vote for candidates that they don't find as libertarian as others, my suggestion to the party is recruit and support better candidates. Candidates that know how to reach people and have the resources to do so. The answer to me is not shutting out thousands of voters who might be inclined to vote for your party if they find the right opportunity to do so. So yeah, I can see the concern. I've heard the concern from other parties. At the end of the day, I think that an open primary is going to produce candidates that know how to appeal to voters and win elections. And if winning elections is not important to the Libertarian Party, then that's fine. They can act that way, but they're not a real party then. All they are is an associated group of people who want to talk about politics some and maybe vote and do some other stuff. That's not a political party. Let's go back to the reality. The sole fundamental purpose of a political party is to mobilize people and resources to win elections. That's its purpose. We have other institutions to reinforce ideological purity. We have other institutions to reinforce messaging, but that's not the job of a political party. And if the Libertarian Party wants to be a political party, they will act like it. And if they don't want to be a political party, they don't have to be.
I have to leave at 12:10, so I want to make sure I can get this in. Because I think it's
Feel free to make your closing comment.
I think it's important to realize in January there was 989,358 Republicans in Oklahoma. I'm the former public state chairman. How's the platform made? About 1,200 people would show up if we could keep a quorum. Because right now, after the state chairman's race, enough people left, there wasn't a quorum to even have a platform. So under the 2015 platform. As someone who's been a political consultant, and I went out and I recruited candidates across the state to run for office, whether it's House, Senate, those type of things. I bet less than 1% has read the Republican Party platform. I don't know that any of the major Republican candidates for governor has read the Republican platform. I don't know that any of the major Democrat candidates have read the Democrat Party platform. So out of 989,000 people, a vote of 501 can give you a party platform, but that doesn't mean that the candidates across the state have even read it. And what you're seeing now, Republicans kind of have a supermajority in the legislature. They don't have 67 or 76 votes on the revenue matters, but you see over 50 Republicans kind of in the governing majority, and then there's a group of 17 or 18 that are opposed to those ideas, and then you have the Democrats, so it's almost more like a European parliamentary system with 3 parties right now in the House of Representatives than it is a pure 2-party system. And like I said, we see it on the state level and national level, the parties are very divided. And the one thing that I always say, people are slow to change parties. I mean, there were a lot of people that registered Democrat in Oklahoma a long time ago. John Kennedy was president in the 1970s. That started voting Republican, but they didn't change the Republican Party quickly. It was sometimes a 20-year process. There's a lot of Republicans that have changed to Democrats across the country, but they don't just go, you know what, I'm going to change parties today. I mean, sometimes they, in Oklahoma, you just may go get your driver's license renewed and say, switch parties. I see that right there. And so that's one thing I think you should be just aware of as someone who's not a libertarian. But just to put that out there, if you're going to try to control everything by a platform, I don't think platforms actually can govern. I think the people that get elected govern.
Thank you. Did any of the panelists have anything that they'd like to say and they haven't had a chance to say it to this point? And we're going to open questions up to the audience. Anybody that's interested in speaking, I'll bring the mic to, or anybody that's interested in asking a question.
As the LNC Region 7 alternate for Oklahoma, for our region, some of the stuff that I'm hearing is incredibly concerning to me. If we have candidates running who haven't read the platform, does anyone on the panel see that as problematic, or is it just me?
It's been kind of the point that I've been trying to drive home is the Libertarian Party is highly engaged. They are highly politically knowledgeable. They are highly motivated, and they were willing to sacrifice all of their political capital that they may have had elsewhere to join the Libertarian Party. The Libertarian Party is unique in the old party structure. Nothing that Mr. Davenport or Mr. Alexander has said is wrong. They are 100% correct. It is all about numbers. It is a social movement. It is slow progress over the years in order to get a society to change its mentality. However, you have to go back to the very beginnings of those political parties in order to understand how that took place. They did come out with a unifying message. They came out with a solid structure, and that's how they gained their support. They didn't do it by pandering or inclusion or inviting anybody to come into the party. They did it by saying, we are going to do this for you, but in return, you are going to support these provisions. And that's the same process that we're going through right now. We are more than willing to accept anybody who wants to walk into the Libertarian Party today, tomorrow, next week, next year, 20 years from now, whenever they decide and they come to the realization that liberty is the way to go. Yes, campaigns are about reaching the people and electing the right people to state offices, whether it's in the House or the Senate or the governorship. Any of those situations, it does require a lot of money, it requires a lot of time, and it requires a candidate who is going to be able to go out there and present a message that's going to appeal to more people than his opponents are. There is no question about that, and that's not anything that's ever been in contention in this entire discussion. What is in contention is how much are we willing to sacrifice our message in order to get those votes. In our infancy, as highly as impressionable as any infancy is, bringing in mass numbers of people who have not committed to the message compromises the party. It compromises the principles, and all it does is it makes us a centrist organization that doesn't need to exist because they're already there. They call them independents.
So I'm gonna piggyback a little bit here on Rex. I totally agree with the ideas that Mr. Davenport particularly has put out today, that the sole responsibility and priority of the Libertarian Party should be to elect candidates and grow our message and advance policy in a libertarian way after we win these elections. What I disagree with Mr. Davenport with is how we get there. I believe that the data that we don't have and my personal experiences show that having a closed system is going to be best for us in the long term, because of the fact that we are a multi-faction party. Just like James said, we talked about factions in the Republican Party, the Trump faction, the Cruz faction. Well, that goes doubly so for the Libertarian Party. We have the James Weeks faction, the John McAfee faction, the Bill Weld faction, the Chris Cantwell faction. We have too many factions, and this leads to political instability in the long term. How do we solve this? Well, by having a closed primary system, we're able to slightly mitigate these impacts. We're able to move towards a more unified message as a state party if we have less variance in the very few candidates that we're able to have right now. I'm working with several candidates right now as the liaison. Some of them have some very anti-libertarian ideas on certain things. I've had to deal with a candidate who's a very single-payer healthcare supporter. And dealing with this in itself is a challenge, especially when you're a small party with very few resources, when it's hard to recruit candidates in the first place. To deal with this, moving towards a closed primary system, we'll be able to refocus our message as a party in our infancy. We'll be able to more adequately advance what our party's ideals are and then market it to the public. But we don't even have those ideals centralized yet. And inviting the political entropy that independents who outnumber us 80-1 into our primary systems is not going to solve this. It's going to exacerbate the issues, and it's going to be very problematic for the party in the future. We talked about recruiting better candidates as a solution. James advocated that. Well, we can permutate that argument. We can do both. That's my job. That's what I'm trying to do here. Very difficult job. It's a big challenge to find quality libertarian candidates when there's only 4,000 registered libertarians in the state. We have entire counties that don't have a single libertarian in them. And inviting in all these independents isn't going to solve that issue. It's not going to increase registration. It's not going to increase our chances of winning elections. It's just going to destabilize